The sensation of metal closing around my wrists was colder than I expected. It wasn't the kind of cold you feel from an open window in winter. It was the deep, industrial chill of finality. 1 second, I was holding the keys to a brand new McLaren, the leather interior smelling like victory. The next, my hands were being wrenched behind my back, and the showroom floor was spinning. "She kidnapped my mother," the voice cut through the air like shattered glass. My mother, Brenda, was standing 20 feet away, her face twisted into a mask of perfectly rehearsed terror. She was pointing at me, her finger trembling just enough to sell the performance to the 3 police officers who had swarmed the building. "She drugged her," Brenda screamed, her voice cracking for dramatic effect. "Look at her. My mother doesn't even know where she is. She forced her to sign that bank draft." I didn't scream back. I didn't fight the officer who was tightening the cuffs until they bit into my skin. I just looked past him, past the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the $1 million cars, to the passenger seat of the cherry red SUV. My grandmother, Eleanor, was sitting there. She looked small, frail, her hands were clutching her purse, and her eyes were darting around the room with a vacant, terrified expression I had never seen before. She looked exactly like the helpless, senile old woman my mother was describing. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor, trembling. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, his voice a low drone in my ear. I didn't hear the rest. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the sound of my mother's sobbing, which grew louder as the officers led me toward the exit. She rushed past me to comfort the victim, hugging the officers, thanking them for saving her family from a predator. A predator. That's what she called me. Her own daughter. The automatic doors slid open, and the humid Houston air hit me, thick and suffocating. As they pushed me into the back of the squad car, I caught one last glimpse of Brenda. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching me through the glass wall of the showroom, and for a split second, the mask slipped. She wasn't sad. She was smiling. A small, cold smirk of absolute triumph. Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever realized your own family was more dangerous than a stranger. Because I just learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. 2 hours earlier, the air conditioning in the showroom had felt like a blessing, not a prison. I pulled my dented, 10-year-old sedan into the lot, parking it as far away from the front entrance as possible. It rattled and wheezed before the engine finally died, a stark, embarrassing contrast to the sleek lines of Porsches and McLarens gleaming under the Texas sun. My name is Jasmine, and at 26 years old, I had spent my entire adult life trying to be invisible to people like the ones inside that building. But today was different. Today, I wasn't just the broke daughter of Houston's most debt-ridden real estate agent. I was the driver. I walked around to the passenger side and helped my grandmother out. Eleanor was 75, dressed in her Sunday best, a floral dress that had seen better decades and a cardigan despite the heat. She leaned heavily on my arm, her steps slow and shuffling. To anyone watching, she looked like a confused pensioner who had wandered away from a bus stop. But I felt the tension in her grip. It wasn't frailty. It was anticipation. The automatic glass doors hissed open, and we stepped into the refrigerated air of the showroom. It smelled of expensive leather and floor wax. My mother, Brenda, was standing near a cherry red SUV, laughing at something a man in a tailored suit was saying. She looked polished, radiant, and completely fake. She spotted us almost immediately. Her smile didn't drop. It just froze, then shattered. She excused herself from the client and marched toward us, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She grabbed my elbow, her nails digging in. "Get out. You're embarrassing me. Go back to the trailer, Jasmine. I told you never to come to my work." "We're looking for a car," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Brenda laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "A car? You couldn't afford the air in the tires of that SUV. Get mother out of here before she drools on the merchandise." That was the moment the mask dropped. Grandma Eleanor didn't shuffle. She didn't look down. She straightened her spine, pulling her arm away from me, and looked her daughter dead in the eye. The fog of age seemed to evaporate instantly. "I like that one," Eleanor said. Her voice was clear, loud enough to carry across the silent showroom. She pointed a trembling finger at the cherry red SUV Brenda had been trying to sell. "The big one. I want to buy it." Brenda rolled her eyes, looking around to see if her manager was watching. "Mom, stop it. You're senile. You don't have cash," Eleanor interrupted. She reached into her worn-out purse and pulled out a bank draft. It wasn't a wrinkled dollar bill. It was a cashier's check. Brenda snatched it, ready to tear it up, but her hands froze. I watched her eyes widen as she counted the zeros. $300,000. Certified funds. Manager, Eleanor called out. The floor manager, a slick man with a practiced smile, appeared out of nowhere, sensing the scent of money. He looked at the check, then at Brenda, then at the little old lady in the floral dress. Is there a problem, ladies? No problem, Eleanor said, smiling sweetly at him. I'm buying this car. Full price. Right now. But I have one condition. Brenda stepped forward, trying to regain control. Sir, this is my mother. She's not thinking clearly. My condition? Eleanor spoke over her, her voice turning into steel. Is that the commission for this sale does not go to this woman. She was rude to me. I want the commission to go to the person who brought me here. Put Jasmine's name on the referral paperwork. The manager didn't hesitate. He looked at Brenda, then at the check. Greed is a powerful calculator. Of course, ma'am. We can work that out. Jasmine, was it? I watched the blood drain from my mother's face. She stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, stripped of her commission, her authority, and her dignity in front of her boss and her colleagues. I signed the referral papers with a shaking hand. It felt like the greatest victory of my life. I thought we had won. I thought we had finally taught her a lesson. I didn't know I was signing my own arrest warrant. The euphoria lasted exactly 4 minutes. I was holding the heavy key fob in my hand, still smiling at the look on Brenda's face. Grandma Eleanor was humming a little tune, something she hadn't done in months. We turned toward the exit, the glass doors reflecting the bright Texas sunshine waiting for us. We were 3 steps away from freedom when the doors didn't open. I frowned, stepping closer to the sensor. Nothing. The glass remained shut. Then I heard the click, a heavy, mechanical sound of magnetic locks engaging. What's going on? I muttered, turning around. That's when I saw the blue lights flashing against the showroom windows. Not 1 car. 2. Then 3. Sirens wailed, cutting through the silence of the dealership like a scream. Police! A voice boomed from outside. Stay where you are. My stomach dropped. I looked at Brenda. She wasn't angry anymore. She was standing by the reception desk, her phone in her hand, watching the scene unfold with a terrifying calmness. She nodded at the manager, who looked pale but compliant. The side door burst open. 4 officers stormed in, hands hovering near their holsters. The energy in the room shifted from commercial luxury to violent threat in a heartbeat. Step away from the elderly woman, the lead officer shouted, pointing at me. Wait, no, she's my grandmother. I raised my hands instinctively, dropping the key fob. It clattered loudly on the tile. Brenda rushed forward then, transforming instantly. The cold, calculating woman from moments ago vanished, replaced by a sobbing, frantic daughter. She threw herself toward the officers, pointing a shaking finger at me. Thank God you're here, she wailed, tears streaming down her face. She forced her. Look at my mother. She doesn't even know where she is. The officers looked at Eleanor. And my grandmother, my sharp, defiant grandmother who had just bought a car out of spite, shrank. Her shoulders hunched. Her eyes went wide and vacant. She began to tremble, clutching her purse to her chest like a frightened child. I want to go home, Eleanor whispered, her voice reedy and weak. Why are we here? Is it time for lunch? I stared at her, paralyzed. What is she doing? Officer, she drugged her. Brenda sobbed, clinging to the nearest cop. My daughter has a history of financial abuse. She kidnapped my mother from her home this morning. She forced her to sign that bank draft. That money is her life savings. That's a lie, I shouted, stepping forward. She wanted to come here. She bought the car herself. 2 officers grabbed me. One twisted my arm behind my back, hard enough to make me gasp. You're under arrest for elder abuse and grand theft, he barked. Grand theft? I choked out as they shoved me against the reception desk. It's her money. Ask her. She's clearly incompetent, ma'am, the officer said, glancing at Eleanor, who was now letting Brenda guide her to a chair, looking lost and confused. Brenda looked back at me over the officer's shoulder. She wasn't just winning. She was rewriting reality. She hugged the officer, burying her face in his uniform. I want to file for emergency guardianship immediately, she said, her voice muffled but clear enough for me to hear. Clearly, my mother is a danger to herself. I need to protect her assets. I saw the flash of a smile on her face before she buried it again. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't just about the commission. It was a trap. She had used my own victory to spring the one legal move that could give her total control over everything. As they dragged me out into the humid heat, passing the cherry-red SUV that was supposed to be our freedom, I realized the terrifying truth. I hadn't just lost a car. I had handed my mother the perfect weapon to lock my grandmother away and seize every penny she had. And Grandma was letting her do it. The holding cell smelled like industrial disinfectant and old sweat. There were no windows, just a heavy steel door with a small, reinforced glass slit and a stainless steel bench bolted to the concrete floor. I sat on the edge of that bench, my knees pulled up to my chest, shivering. They had taken my shoelaces and my phone. I was cut off from the world, trapped in a gray box while my mother was out there, dismantling my life piece by piece. Emergency guardianship. I knew what those words meant. I worked in medical billing before I quit to care for Grandma full-time. I knew the legal power those words carried. If Brenda got guardianship, she wouldn't just control Grandma's decisions. She would control her body, her home, and every asset she possessed. She could stick Eleanor in a state-run facility the next morning and sell her house by the afternoon. But it wasn't the fear of losing the house that made my blood boil. It was the hypocrisy. 3 weeks ago, my mother didn't want guardianship. She didn't even want to be a daughter. I closed my eyes, and the memory played out against the back of my eyelids, sharp and stinging. It was a Tuesday. The cardiologist had called me with bad news. Eleanor's heart condition had shifted. The generic meds weren't working anymore. She needed a specific, non-formulary drug to regulate her rhythm. The cost was $300 a month. Medicare wouldn't cover it. I had $40 in my bank account. I called Brenda from the pharmacy parking lot, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Mom, it's urgent," I had said. "The doctor says this isn't optional. If she doesn't take this pill, she could go into cardiac arrest. It's $300. Can you transfer it?" Brenda's sigh had been loud enough to crack the speaker. "Jasmine, we've talked about this," she said, her tone bored, like I was asking for money for a manicure. "I don't have $300 to throw away right now. The market is slow." "It's not throwing it away. It's her heart medication. It keeps her alive." "For how long?" The question hung in the humid air of the parking lot. "What?" "She's 75, Jasmine," Brenda said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was practical. Chillingly, brutally practical. "She's a sinking ship. Why are we throwing money into a sinking ship? We have to be realistic about resources. At a certain point, nature needs to take its course." Normalized cruelty. That's what it was. She didn't think she was being evil. She thought she was being a savvy investor, cutting her losses on an asset that had stopped depreciating and started costing. To Brenda, her mother wasn't a person. She was a line item on a balance sheet that was bleeding red. "You're saying you won't pay for it?" I whispered. "I'm saying I won't enable your inability to let go," she snapped. "Put her on the generic stuff. If it's her time, it's her time." She hung up. I sat in my car and cried for 10 minutes. Then, I wiped my face and opened Grandma's old purse, looking for loose change. Anything to scrape together a few dollars. That was when I found it. Tucked inside a folded receipt for bread and milk was a slip of thermal paper. A Powerball ticket. I checked the numbers on my phone, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped it. I checked them again. And a third time. $500 million. Grandma didn't know. Or maybe she did. But in that moment, the irony nearly choked me. Brenda had refused to pay $300 to keep a sinking ship afloat. She didn't know that ship was carrying $500 million in cargo. I hid the ticket in the lining of my own purse, the same purse the police had just confiscated and thrown into an evidence locker. I opened my eyes, staring at the gray wall of the cell. Brenda thought she had arrested a thief. She thought she was saving her inheritance from a greedy granddaughter, but she didn't realize that by arresting me, she had just locked up the only person who knew where the money was. And she had no idea that the sinking ship she was trying to commandeer had just armed its torpedoes. I was expecting a public defender. You know the type, overworked, underpaid, wearing a suit that's seen too many courtrooms and a tie that was fashionable 10 years ago. Someone who would tell me to plead guilty to a lesser charge just to make the paperwork go away. So when the heavy steel door of the interview room clanged open, I didn't even look up. I was too busy staring at the scratches on the metal table, trying to figure out how to survive prison. "Miss Jasmine?" The voice was smooth, cultured. It didn't sound like it belonged in a county jail. I looked up. The man standing in the doorway looked like he had just stepped out of a boardroom in Manhattan. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him like a second skin, the kind of tailoring that whispers money rather than screaming it. He carried a slim leather briefcase and smelled faintly of sandalwood and expensive scotch. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a weapon. "I'm Arthur Sterling," he said, setting the briefcase on the table. He didn't offer to shake my hand, probably because I was still cuffed to the bench. "I represent the trust." "The trust?" I croaked. My throat was dry. I don't have money for you. Your fees have been covered," he said, sitting down opposite me. He opened the briefcase. There were no messy files, no loose papers. Just a sleek tablet and a single, heavy fountain pen. "We don't have much time," Your mother has moved faster than we anticipated. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Brenda has filed for an emergency temporary guardianship, Sterling said. His tone was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. The hearing is in 45 minutes. She has an affidavit from the police officers at the scene and a statement from a Dr. Evans claiming your grandmother is suffering from acute dementia and is susceptible to undue influence. That's a lie, I snapped, leaning forward as far as the cuffs would allow. Dr. Evans? That's her friend's husband. He's an orthopedic surgeon. Not a neurologist. He hasn't even examined her. Sterling didn't look surprised. He tapped his pen calmly. In emergency hearings, the bar for evidence is low. Judges prioritize safety. Brenda has framed this as an elderly woman being exploited by a desperate granddaughter. The court will grant guardianship. Then we have to stop her, I said, panic rising. If she gets it, she'll sell the house and lock Grandma away. We have to prove she's sane. Show the lottery ticket. Sterling looked at me, cold and composed. No, we're not proving she's sane. And we're not mentioning the ticket yet. I froze. If we fight competency now, it becomes a messy, endless battle, he said. Even if Brenda loses today, she'll come back tomorrow and drain the estate in legal fees. He paused. To end this permanently, we need Brenda to win. We need her to testify under oath that her mother is incompetent. We need a court order stripping Eleanor of her rights based on Brenda's words. Why would we want that? A sharp, predatory smile crossed his face. Because your grandmother anticipated this. 48 hours ago, she placed a poison pill in the trust. He tapped the table. We let Brenda win the battle. So she loses the war. Do you trust me? I thought of Brenda's cruelty. Her indifference. Do it, I said. Let her win.